Hello, welcome to the Learning Revolution's Emergency Home Learning Summit. I'm Lisa Leuck, and I'm your host today for Little Leaders Everywhere, Teaching Leadership with Picture Books. I am a library director in a small town in Iowa, but I have a lot of experience with youth. We do a lot of youth programming at my library. We have an after-school program, a story hour, we get speakers, we do summer reading, lots of things like that. And what I have discovered is that the books, of course, to me are the most important thing, but that you can teach anything with books. And so the concept we're going to talk about today is leadership, which might be one that you haven't normally thought of teaching or teaching with picture books. So what we're going to cover is why it's important in programming. And if you're a teacher, that programming is your class, right? What leadership skills do for kids, how communication skills are so important in leadership and really anything. And I'm going to give you lots of examples about books that you can use to teach leadership. So you might want to jot those down if you're interested. So why teach leadership? Leadership is a way to bring teams together and teach cooperation. Now in remote learning, cooperation might be being quieter in the classroom. It might be being able to use an online tool to work together, which is maybe even more difficult than what these girls are doing in this picture. In this picture, they're working on a breakout puzzle. And if you haven't discovered Breakout EDU as a game, they do have digital games that you can use online. It's a great way to build teams and to foster cooperation in children. These girls are working on one of their puzzles for Breakout, and when they solve all the puzzles and get all the clues, then they can go and try and unlock the lockbox. In a normal year, they would be able to do that physically with the locks, and they love that. But first they have to solve puzzles, and they have to work in their team to do that. And the girl in the middle, my good girl, Lila, she is a little frustrated by this puzzle, as you can see. But the other girls are encouraging her and keeping everyone on task and really looking at what the problem is and trying to share the job of solving that puzzle. So they're all saying, I've got this, and eventually Lila joins in because we do work on these skills, not only at school, but also in the library. So they do teach creative problem solving as well, better communication skills because they have to communicate with each other. And then if they're going to share any ideas later, like they might in the classroom, then they need to be able to communicate with others, and now online as well. They also learn real life tools, and I'm going to share some of those with you. And everyone is talking about socio-emotional learning right now because of all the feelings going on during the pandemic and how we really have to weigh how children and teachers are feeling in the classroom, because it can hinder their learning or help them if they feel good. All right, some other things that leadership training does is teach real world tools, such as negotiation. Here's a good book to teach that, The Day the Crayons Quit. This is a book where the crayons are just disgusted that they only get to be one color. They want to do other jobs, and they don't see why the boy with the crayon box can't make that happen for them. So they each write a letter to the boy explaining why they are disgusted and why they should be able to do a new job that they know that they will be good at. And of course, those letters are very persuasive, and in the end, the boy allows them to do another job. So it's a very good book about negotiation, also teaches colors and lots of other concepts that your students might need. Leadership books also teach design thought, which is kind of a buzzword out there right now. And a book that is very good at teaching that is The Most Magnificent Thing. Now, if you ever had a makerspace like I do in my library, or you just like to do crafts in your classroom, The Most Magnificent Thing teaches failing forward, how the first design might not be the best, and how we can achieve success by growing on those ideas. So the girl in the book knows what the most magnificent thing is in her head that she's going to build, but each time she tries to build it, it just does not work out. And although the adults in the book praise her, and the dog, who is her assistant, is very helpful, she still just gets very frustrated with how nothing is that she creates is the most magnificent thing. And so she learns that by taking little pieces of all of her failures and putting them together, and keeping on with her work, that she eventually will be a huge success, and she does build the most magnificent thing. And you'll find out what that is when you get that book. Real world tools that we always need include empathy. You cannot be a good leader without empathy, and children are not successful in the classroom unless they can empathize with other kids and sometimes with their teacher as well. So a book that teaches empathy that is wonderful is The Invisible Boy by Trudy Ludwig. The boy in the book, the pictures almost make it seem like he is really invisible, like magically, but of course he's not. He just feels invisible because nobody notices him. And he's not really all that down about that, but he really wants to make friends. And he has a special talent. As you can see from the cover, he is an artist. And no one really knows that about him yet. And he also has empathy in the book for another boy in the story who is a new kid. And so he welcomes the new kid and makes him feel welcome in the classroom, and also shows him his special talent of drawing. Eventually, the invisible boy becomes invisible again, except that that new boy also feels empathy for him, and then makes him come into his group of new friends, and they all have new friends in the end and are able to share their talents. So empathy, very important. And there are lots of good books besides this one that teach that. What else can teaching leadership do? As you can see by this picture, this is me visiting a real classroom of second and third graders. We have grade sharing at our school. And so this was a very big group to think I was going to read picture books to, but I often do. And they sit as quiet as mice and are very engaged. And that's why I think we can't belittle the power of just reading a book out loud. And this day, it was a John Maxwell April day where we try and get in some youth leadership training for free. And so I went to their classroom and read a couple of leadership books. And all I did was did a very short lesson on a couple key concepts. And I'm going to show you some concepts that you might want to do. And they just loved it. I got very important feedback from the teachers that was wonderful. They said they were going to use some of these concepts in their classroom. They're very easy to teach, and look at those kids. They're all super happy. But another thing it did by me going and doing outreach like that, and what you can do and emphasize in your online classroom, is that leadership is all about community as well. I'm not just the library, and you are just not the teacher or whatever position. We all belong to a community, and we need to build that community now more than ever before. And teaching leadership skills to kids at a young age shows them that they are part of something bigger, and that bigger thing is very important as well. So books that teach about community, here are some good ones. One I really like that the kids really love is Extra Yarn. Now you might not think a book about yarn is super exciting to them, but this one is. The girl has a box of yarn that never runs out of yarn, because she knits and knits and knits for everyone and everything, and which is kind of funny. And then when she wants to knit the next thing, she is never out of yarn because she always has extra yarn. And the kids love to say that with me when we read it. And then there is a bad guy in the book who has figured out that this box of yarn is pretty magical because it never runs out. And so he wants it and thinks he can obtain it for an amount of money. And the girl will not sell it. And so he decides to steal it. And so there are lots of concepts to teach in here, but one is that we can stick together. We never give up. We can keep what is ours and still help our community by knitting or whatever we do best for everyone in our community. Todd Parr has many, many good books that teach concepts, and the Peace Book is a great one to teach about community. They're very colorful books, very simple, but yet very powerful with their words. I want to also tell you about Wanda's Roses by Pat Brisson. This is an older book that I really like to read because it just is, to me, the epitome of building community. The girl in the book finds an empty lot that's full of junk, and so it's not a great part of their community, but what she finds there, if you look at the cover, you can see that is she finds a bush. And so she goes to the library, of course, to research what kind of bush it is, and decides that it's a rose bush. And then she learns what it would take to make the rose bush grow, because it's definitely not growing. And so of course it needs water, and it needs sunshine, and it needs room to grow. So the people in her community, like the grocer and the librarian and many others, help her to create that atmosphere for the rose bush, even though they know that bush is not growing, it's dead. But Wanda feels so strongly about this lot that they can clean up and this rose bush, that they all join in and they all strengthen their community through her. And in the end, she knows that that rose bush isn't going, but she's learned so much about making things grow and making her community grow that it doesn't matter, and the lot becomes a beautiful place for everyone. Which kind of leads into Maybe Something Beautiful, which is a book about actually creating art for a city and making it beautiful, which also brings communities together. Seeds and Trees is about kind of a fable about good seeds and bad seeds, and that if we plant the good seeds and really nurture them, then great things can happen. All Are Welcome, another great book about welcoming everyone and diversity, and how wonderful that is in our community, in our classroom, or anywhere we are. And then A Hat for Mrs. Goldman is just a really great story about the girl learns to knit from Mrs. Goldman, and they knit hats, but Mrs. Goldman always gives her hats away to people in the community. And so when she goes outside, her head is cold. So the girl decides that she better knit a hat for Mrs. Goldman herself, which is pretty difficult, even though Mrs. Goldman has taught her how. But she has always just been in charge of the pom-poms on the hat. And so she creates this hat with all these pom-poms all over it, and it's kind of a goofy looking hat, and she doesn't feel good about it. But in the end, she gives it to Mrs. Goldman, and of course, Mrs. Goldman loves it and wears it, and they have both learned something about working together and community and love. So, good books about community. Another thing that I have tried to do in my library is to not reinvent the wheel of leadership, even though I am a John Maxwell trained leadership trainer. The school that I do outreach to, they are a Covey school. They do Leader in Me. And, you know, those concepts are wonderful too. It doesn't matter whose book of leadership you're teaching from, or even just if you're just pulling out, you know, concepts on your own to teach in your classroom, it doesn't matter. But what I do is I try and support these, reinforce what they are doing so that the school also sees a tie and a bond between the library and the school. And I try and expand on key concepts that they are teaching. This helps, not only has the school found out, but we have found out in the library that it helps issues of behavior. I can give you one little short example of that happening in my library. During a normal year, we will have movie days for the kids on some days. And they come in, and there might be 40 kids in our small program room. And they have enough room to sit and spread out a little bit, and we feed them popcorn. And, you know, anytime you feed popcorn to 40 children, it's going to be kind of a disaster, right? There's popcorn on the floor, and it's not because they're naughty about it. We don't let them throw the popcorn. You know, they're not really doing that, or not very much. So it's just, popcorn's just messy, and it just happens. But what used to happen when the movie was over, the kids would all line up at the door, and I would come out of the library and open the door for them. And my Miss Amanda, who helps me with my programming, she is the one who sits in the movie with them. And she would try to get them to pick up the popcorn on the floor and the juice boxes and help pick up the room. And so would I. I would stand at the door. And inevitably, all the kids would argue with me about how, oh, they already picked up and there was nothing to pick up. And they would look around behind them at the floor, and I don't know what they were seeing, but I was seeing Armageddon of popcorn, and they did not want to help. But once the school and once we tried to reinforce these leadership skills, what we found is that this changed a little bit. And Miss Amanda came out to me one day and she said, Lisa, come in here. After the movie was over. And I said, oh, okay, what's going on? And so I went in and I looked around, and there were 5 or 6 kids just picking up popcorn. And Amanda hardly had to ask them to do that. And after they were done, they came up to me and asked me if there was anything else to do. So this was quite a change from arguing about doing a job to really wanting to help. because they really did think of this as a win-win situation. If Lisa's happy, if Amanda's happy, then we're happy, and the library is a happy place. We want to be able to come to movies again, and maybe if we don't help out, maybe it's too hard for Lisa and Amanda to do this. I think they really started to think about all of those things, creating a cooperative atmosphere and taking a positive action and picking up that popcorn rather than a negative one of arguing about it. Leadership is influence, says John Maxwell, and that is so true. I'm going to use an example of leadership in our makerspace. When we have a makerspace in the library that you can use at any time, but then we also do what we call Makerspace Days as a program. So during this program that you see in the corner of my slide there, the kids had to create Santa's village. So they divided into teams, and they were each team was in charge of a section of the village, and they could decide from a list that we came up with and brainstormed together which part of the village they would like to do. And so they thought about these key concepts while they were working on their section. Put first things first. Who is going to be the one to begin? All right, let's say we have to build the stable for the reindeer. Who's going to start? What are we going to do? Do we have a plan? Do we seek first to understand our problem? What kinds of things could we put in that stable? What would the reindeer want? What is possible for us to build? We had all kinds of materials, not just craft materials, but we had the magnets and the Legos and pipe cleaners and all kinds of things that they could not only draw and create with paper and things like that, but also build. And so if they understood what problem they wanted to solve for the reindeer, then they might get an idea and they had to work together. So they have to think of a win-win, and that means they have to work together, because if they create with confidence and they work together, they'll get it done and it'll look great. We had one team that could not do that. They had a really hard time, first of all, deciding what their design would look like. They argued about that a lot. Then when it came to building it, no one had a buy-in. They really didn't want to make this thing that whoever was telling them to did. So they all started to just create their own little things, which then they all got upset that they weren't going together. And in the end, they really didn't have anything. And so they learned a lot that day about leadership skills, even though they didn't create anything. But if you look down at the picture, then they had to put their team's piece all together and create the village then. And in order to know that that village went together in a smooth way, we had them make a path with our Ozobots, which are little round robots that follow a marker line. If you've never had those before, they're really fun. And we have a set of those at the library. So they had to make the Ozobot go through the whole village, not just their part. So another exercise in cooperation, and they just really loved it. They were very proactive about looking, oh, that robot's going to run into that, or that line isn't drawn correctly, we have to change it. And it was a really great exercise. And that group that didn't create a piece of the puzzle, they really learned that they were left out because they couldn't get these skills to work. And I think they learned a lot about how the other groups got them to work. So it was a great thing. Other books that teach Covey concepts, if you want to use some of them, Seek First to Understand and Then Be Understood. The Day You Begin is a great one for that. It's about a girl going to school and trying to include the new girl in class and really thinking about what the girl is thinking. So it's a book about empathy, and kids a lot of times just want to dive in, and they are selfish creatures just by nature, and they don't always think about what everyone else needs. So that's a good concept and a wonderful book by Jacqueline Woodson. Being proactive, to me, that has a lot to do with goal setting. And in this one, in Because, which is a newer book by Mo Willems, it's about a girl who kind of by accident gets to go to the orchestra to see the orchestra play, and she just falls in love with it, and it becomes her whole goal in life to be a conductor. And so she is proactive in the way that she goes about that goal. First learning her instrument and perfecting it and not giving up when she fails, and by being focused on that goal, in the end, she is able to achieve what she wants. So a beautiful book. Other ones, Putting First Things First. There are a lot of books like this, but one I like is Everyone Can Learn to Ride a Bicycle. And it's just a very simple but colorful and fun book about learning to ride and the steps to do that. For instance, at first we have somebody hold the back of the seat while we go to steady us. And then once we've got that down, then we go. And then we get to the next step in riding. So a great thing for Put Things First, First Things First. Think Win-Win. I Like Bird Hugs. That's a newer book. And it's about a bird with wings that are just too long, or not too long, but they're very long. And she doesn't quite know what to do with them. They don't really allow her to fly, so she has to find different ways to at first cover them up and make them not look so big. But then once she embraces that they are her wings, she wants to find a useful thing to do with them if she can't fly. And so she discovers that she's the best hug giver in the forest, and they all line up to get her hugs. So it's a win-win. A great quote by John Maxwell that really brings about more concepts that we can really teach about leadership to kids. There are 5 non-negotiable characteristics of every effective leader. And these characteristics are a sense of calling, an ability to communicate, creativity and problem solving, which we've already touched on, generosity, and consistency. A sense of calling is a little bit more difficult to find in children's books, but I just told you about one. That Because would be a good one for that. But also we have one by Nina Layden called Roberto the Insect Architect, which is about a termite who really doesn't want to eat the wood. He just wants to build with the wood. And the other termites say, I don't know, you're crazy. What are you doing? Why would you want to build something? Roberto sticks with his calling and becomes a great builder. Communication, we're going to talk a little bit more about that too, but The Rooster Who Would Not Be Quiet is a great book for that. Creativity and problem solving, The Sand Castle That Lola Built is a wonderful book. There are many books about building sandcastles, but this one really is about team building and how she is creative in the way that she brings others into her team, and how in the end they support her when, of course, the sandcastle gets ruined. And there are also many books about generosity, and Todd Parr, again, is another one that is great to teach that skill. And consistency, The Kindness Quilt, how we can all work together, and if we are consistent, we do learn kindness from each other. Another one of John Maxwell's books about connection is Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And that has the 4 components of communication that I really feel are extremely important, and you can see them there. What people see, what people understand, what people feel, and what people hear. And when all 4 of those are not present in communication, things just get messed up. And communication with kids is difficult. It's difficult for them sometimes, and especially if we are online, a lot of these 4 components just get left out. What are people feeling? What is that child feeling? When you say something, what is that person feeling about it? Do they understand what you're saying? That's another key one right now online. Is what you are saying to those kids, are they really knowing what you're saying? Or do you need to use different words to express that? What they see, are you all lit up on the screen? I try to do that, but I know that it's difficult sometimes. And when you're in-person teaching, we were talking about the other day how now with masks, it is difficult because the kids are not seeing the phonics on the faces. So that's a barrier that we have to try to get past. And then, of course, what do people hear? They hear your tone, they hear your love, they hear your kindness, they hear your enthusiasm, or they hear your boredom. So those kinds of things are very important to think about. And books, again, that teach communication. There are lots of good ones. Peter Reynolds, wonderful author. He has many, many concept books that are very beautiful and simple and teach these concepts very well. Here are a couple: The Word Collector and Say Something, which is all about if you see something, say something. A wonderful concept there. You Will Be My Friend by Peter Brown, about a bear who demands that her friends be friends with her. But of course, that's not a great way to communicate, and she figures that out and finds her people in the end. Sophia Valdez, Future Prez, a great one by Andrea Beatty. That is part of a great series of books like Rosie Revere, Engineer, Iggy Peck, Architect. Many great leadership books there. But this one especially, Sophia has to communicate with adults about what she wants, just as a president would. And so very great book to teach communication. And there are a couple other ones there. Rosemary Wells, Sophie, use your words, Sophie, about how some kids really need to just speak their words and what they want in order to communicate. So it's sort of about younger children, if you need one for preschoolers or something like that. And Max's Words is just a very imaginative book about how important words are, and how we put them together is important as well. Growth mindset is another thing that is part of leadership to teach. And here are some great books to teach growth mindset, that we have to start somewhere. We need to look at our failures in order to grow, and that we will grow if we keep trying and building upon what we know. Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn for Kids is a fairly new book by John Maxwell, where he takes some of his very adult concepts of leadership and makes a creative rhyming story with them, and about teamwork and failing forward. The two in the middle are just beautiful books that sometimes just I'll read them and they just bring me to tears, because they are just such a creative way to look at these complex concepts of a chance and an idea. In fact, the chance and the idea are actual characters. If you look at the cover of What You Do with an Idea, that little yellow creature looks kind of like a fat chicken or something. It's just an imaginary creature, and that is the idea in the book. So when the idea grows in our head, that little character also gets bigger. So it really helps kids connect that abstract type of leadership concept and makes it real, so that they can really see it as a character or as a thing in their lives. Very imaginative way to do that. And then another great creative book is The Dot. I'm sure many of you have read that book by Peter Reynolds, about how our creations are personal and judging them is difficult, but we have to start somewhere. Is another concept, is we have to start with the dot. The blank paper might be a creation, but people will appreciate the dot and how you grow that idea on paper more than a blank page. And what does a good leader look like? These are three things that John Maxwell teaches, that this is what a good leader looks like. They meet evolving needs, they become indispensable, and they innovate with confidence. This is a tough one for me. I have learned a lot during the pandemic about innovation. I do have a VR headset in my library, and it gives me fits sometimes, because I don't have the time to work with it that I wish I did, but the kids love it. And so I have to innovate. I have to keep meeting their needs. And I want to be indispensable to them, just as they are indispensable to me. I miss them so much in my library. And books that teach those concepts, Otis, that's a whole series by Lauren Long. Otis is always there and always evolving, and he is always meeting the needs of his farm friends and family. And he adjusts himself to be, even though he's a tractor, he can be what everyone needs. Pumpkin Soup is an older book by Helen Cooper that really is great about how people really like to stick to their job, the job they know, they just want to do that job. But sometimes we have to branch out and grow. And they learn that by switching up their jobs and making the soup a little bit. So it's kind of a funny book, has great animal characters. And then here's another one by Andrea Beatty, Iggy Peck, Architect, Innovate with Confidence. He learns that building can save the world. And if he can do it confidently without somebody telling him he can't, it works even better. Another great way to teach leadership is just by example. You are their leader, but it's good also for them to have a whole catalog of other leaders in their head that they can refer to. And so biographies are a wonderful way to teach leadership. And there are getting to be so many more wonderful biographies that are picture book style instead of chapter book style, which might be a little too old to share in your classroom. Because even older kids as old as sixth grade, for sure, really still love picture books, and they are shorter and pack more impact in than you can in a chapter book. It's very hard in a lesson, unless you're doing a book study in literature, to do a whole chapter book, especially online. So picture books are a great way to shorten the examples and punch home the points that you are trying to make. Abe Lincoln's Dream by Lane Smith might be one, I don't know, that you haven't heard of. That's just a wonderful book, very simple, but very memorable, about teaching Lincoln's concepts of leadership, and these others as well. Books that teach the qualities of a good leader, there are many, and I have pointed out a few of these already, but one of my favorites is Stand Tall, Molly Lou Mellon. And now there is Have Fun, Molly Lou Mellon, which is more of, an innovative thinking and makerspace kind of book too. But Molly Lou will not be bullied. She will stand up and be her own person and be creative in her own self. And she is happy that way because that is how her grandma taught her to be. And so it's got all kinds of leadership skills in there and a wonderful kind of funny character that everyone can relate to. So check those out. The Cool Bean and the Good Egg by Jory John and Pete Oswald. Also wonderful books that teach great leadership skills in a funny, creative way. And The Thing Lou Wouldn't Do is about conquering your fears. Lots of kids say, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I won't do that. But Lou eventually learns to try and to fail forward as well. Well, that's teaching leadership with picture books, and I hope you got some good ideas of books to use. I'm Lisa Leuck. Again, if you would like to contact me and talk about leadership or talk about using books in your library, your classroom, at home, wherever you might be needing to teach those skills or just to have fun with reading, please just send me a message and I'd be happy to help. I have a little company called Read to Lead, LLC, so check out my website at readtolead.org, and I have some leadership tips on there and picture books. And I just want to say that when you're the leader, you get to do great things and have fun. And that's what my little Star Wars picture is about there. I got to be Princess Leia in a parade, and it was my dream come true for the library. So sharing your leadership skills comes in many forms. So take that force and use it well. Thank you for attending the summit, and have a great day.